My wife cheated with my younger brother in my parents' house. The house where I learned to ride a bike was the same house where my life learned to swerve. My parents' place sat on a quiet street with two big maples out front, the kind that make the yard look like a postcard in fall. It was supposed to be an easy Saturday, a family party, burgers, music, laughter, my dad acting like he invented the grill, my mom pretending she was not counting how many napkins people used, and me, the reliable one, the guy who showed up early to move folding tables and stayed late to take out trash, because that is who I am. A steady hard worker, construction boots by the door, calluses on my hands, paycheck that actually covered bills in our state, not rich guy money, but the kind that lets you sleep without a calculator under your pillow. I liked my job too. I liked waking up before the sun and seeing a building go from nothing to something. I liked being tired for a reason. I liked knowing that if I said I would do something, it got done. My wife used to say that was why she felt safe with me. Safe. That word would come back later like a bad song you cannot get out of your head. We had been married long enough to have routines, her iced coffee order, my lunch packed the same way every day, her habit of leaving hair ties on every surface like she was marking territory, and my habit of pretending I did not notice. I was not a dramatic guy. I was a fix-it guy. If the sink leaked, I fixed it. If the car rattled, I fixed it. If feelings got weird, I tried to fix those too. But feelings are not like pipes. You cannot just tighten something and call it good. My younger brother Kyle was there already when we pulled up. Kyle was the kind of guy who looked like he never met a mirror he did not like. Not a bad-looking dude. I will give him that. But he wore charm the way some people wear cologne. Too much, too close, and he always acted like life owed him a better seat. He bounced between jobs, always in transition, always with a new plan, always with a new story about how someone did him wrong. My parents still treated him like he was 16 and just needed time. I treated him like he was 26 and needed boundaries. My wife, Marissa, treated him like he was entertainment. She laughed at his jokes a little too hard sometimes, I noticed, and I filed it away in the same mental drawer as odd receipts and loose screws. Not proof, just clutter. The party started the way family parties do, with small talk and forced compliments. My aunt asking if I was still lifting heavy things for a living. Yes, Aunt Linda, I am still lifting heavy things. Now please pass the potato salad before I lift my patience right out of my body. Kids ran around. My dad told the same story about the time he caught a fish bigger than his arm. My mom kept refilling everyone's drink like it was her mission to hydrate the entire county. I did my usual, helped, smiled, listened. Did not complain. Marissa looked good, nothing flashy, just her in a sundress, hair up, earrings she only wore when she wanted attention. She was in a bright mood too. That should have made me happy, but it felt like watching sunshine through a window you do not trust. She drifted from group to group, touching arms, leaning in, laughing. She had always been social. I was not. I was the guy who could pour concrete in January, but could not figure out how to enter a conversation without feeling like I was interrupting a parade. Kyle was in her orbit more than once. Each time I saw it, my brain did that little warning beep, the one you ignore because you do not want to be the jealous husband at a family barbecue. Nobody wants that role. It is like wearing a sign that says insecure and bring your own chair. So I stayed busy. I flipped burgers. I helped my dad carry an old cooler from the garage. I fixed a loose hinge on the back gate because of course I did. And every time I looked up, Marissa was somewhere else, laughing again, hair tie on her wrist, phone in her hand. Kyle near enough to be in the picture. At one point my mom asked Marissa to help bring out dessert. Marissa said sure, and Kyle said he would help too. Like we were moving a piano. They disappeared inside, and I did not think much of it, because I was outside, because I was the son who stayed with dad, because I was the husband who trusted his wife, and because I had no idea the universe was about to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey buddy, you missed a spot. It was later when the sun started dipping and the music got louder, when people loosened up, when my cousins started arguing about karaoke like it was a constitutional right, that I went inside to grab more ice. The house was warm from bodies and cooking and memories, and for a second I felt that old comfort, the childhood smell of my mom's candles and my dad's aftershave, and the faint scent of lemon cleaner that told you my mother had declared war on bacteria. I walked toward the kitchen, and I stopped, not because I planned to, but because I heard my name, not spoken, more like breathed, like someone testing how it felt. In their mouth, my name, followed by a laugh that was not meant for family ears. It came from down the hall, near the room my parents used as an office. The door was mostly closed, not all the way, just enough to tell me someone wanted privacy, without committing to the decision. My first thought was silly. Maybe Kyle was messing with my dad's old computer. Maybe Marissa was looking for a charger. Maybe I was about to walk in on something boring, like people hiding to talk about real estate. I should have kept walking. I should have made noise. I should have done 100 things that would have kept me from hearing what I heard next. Kyle's voice, low, pleased with itself, saying, he does not notice. He never notices. And Marissa answering, stop. You are bad. And then, The sound of my wife saying my brother's name the way she used to say mine when we first dated, and my hand tightened on the empty ice bucket so hard my knuckles went white. I did not barge in, not yet, because my body did that strange thing where it freezes while your mind sprints laps. And in that frozen second, I realized the party was still roaring outside. My parents were still smiling. My dad was still proud of his grill. And in the hallway of the house that raised me, something was happening that was about to change what it meant to be a family. I took one careful step closer, and the floorboard did not creak, which felt like a betrayal of its own. I leaned in just enough to see the edge of the room through the crack, and I saw a shadow move. Then I heard a whisper again, and my wife said, "Not here," and my brother said, "Nobody will come in." And that was when I realized the only reason nobody would come in was because they were counting on me to be outside doing what I always do, being the reliable one, the steady one, the guy who keeps the world running while other people take shortcuts. My stomach dropped, my chest went tight, and I made a decision that surprised even me. I stepped back, silent, ice bucket still in my hand like a prop in a bad play. And instead of pushing that door open, I turned and walked toward the living room mirror because I needed to see my own face before I did anything. I needed to know if I looked like a fool yet. And when I caught my reflection, I saw a man in work jeans and a plain shirt, eyes sharp, jaw set, not broken, not screaming, just awake, finally awake. I set the bucket down gently, and I pulled my phone out, not to call anyone, not to text, but to open my notes, because the fix-it guy in me had just met a problem he could not tighten with a wrench. And if I was going to survive it with dignity, I would need a plan. And I was done being the only one in this family who built things while everybody else tore them down. I walked back toward that hallway, and this time I did not stop to listen. I reached for the door, and right before my fingers touched the knob, I heard my mom call from the backyard, asking if anyone had seen the spare lighter for the candles, and my brother laughed behind the door like he had all the time in the world. I held my breath, and I turned the knob anyway, because suspense is for movies, and my life was done waiting for the next scene, and the door began to swing open, and I saw enough to know that what I suspected was real, and enough to know that the next thing I did would echo through every holiday and every family photo from here on out. And I did not blink, because I was not the victim, I was the witness. And witnesses tell the truth, even when the truth burns the whole script down. And the room went quiet, and Marissa looked at me like she had never seen me before, and Kyle said my name like he was testing if it still belonged to me. And I said, "Close your mouth, both of you, because if you think I am about to lose control, you do not know me at all." And then I heard footsteps coming down the hall, my father's footsteps, heavy and familiar, heading straight toward us. Like the universe wanted an audience for the moment my family split in two, and I realized I had exactly one choice to make before he arrived. Either protect them with silence, or protect myself with the truth. And my dad's shadow hit the doorway, and I opened my mouth, and I spoke before my dad did. Not loud, not shaking, just clear, like calling out a measurement on a job site. I said, "Dad, we need a minute." And he stopped because that was the tone I used when something was wrong with the foundation. Marissa stepped back like distance could rewind time. Kyle did that fake calm thing he always did. Hands up, half smile, like he was already planning how to explain this later in a way that somehow made him the victim. My dad looked between us, confusion first, then that slow understanding that comes when your gut figures something out before your brain wants to admit it. My mom's voice floated in from outside asking about candles again. Normal life knocking on the door like it did not get the memo. I closed the office door behind my dad, not slamming it, just firm, because drama is loud and I was done performing. I said, "Nothing happened here that you need to defend, but something happened here that you need to know." Kyle opened his mouth, and I cut him off without even looking at him. I said, "You have said enough for one lifetime." Marissa started crying. Real tears or strategic ones. I honestly did not care anymore. I had crossed into a calm place that surprised me. Like the eye of a storm where you can finally hear yourself think. I told my dad exactly what I walked in on. No details, no insults, just facts. Because facts do not need decoration. His face changed in stages, shock, disbelief. Then something harder, something older, like disappointment that had been waiting a long time for an excuse. He looked at Kyle and said, "Is this true?" Kyle did not answer right away. That was his answer. My dad nodded once like he had just confirmed a bad diagnosis. Then he said, "Go outside. Both of you now." Kyle hesitated. Marissa wiped her face and looked at me like I was supposed to save her from the consequences of her own choices. I stepped aside and opened the door, and she walked past me without a word. Kyle followed, still quiet, still calculating. My dad leaned against the desk and rubbed his face. He looked older in that moment, and that hurt more than anything else so far. He said, "I never wanted this for you." And I said, "Neither did I. But here we are." Footsteps and voices swelled outside as the door opened. The party noticed something was wrong the way crowds always do, not with clarity, just with instinct. My mom saw my dad's face and went still. The music kept playing because nobody had thought to turn it off yet. I walked into the backyard with them, and every eye slowly turned. Marissa stood near the patio like she was bracing for impact. Kyle hovered by the fence like he might climb it if given the chance. My dad cleared his throat, and the sound cut through the noise better than a microphone ever could. He said the party is over, and nobody argued, because when a man like my father says something like that, you listen. People started gathering bags and kids and half-finished plates. The air filled with whispers and confusion. My mom pulled my dad aside, her face pale. He told her quietly. She covered her mouth and then looked at Kyle, and whatever she saw there made her straighten up in a way I had never seen before. She did not yell. She just said, "Go home." Kyle tried to talk. She repeated it, "Go home," and that was it. Marissa came toward me then, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, not angry, just done. I said, "Not here. Not now. Not ever like this." She nodded like she understood, but her eyes said she was already rewriting the story in her head, making herself smaller, making me colder. I recognized that move. I had seen it before when she talked about old friends who drifted away. I grabbed my jacket and my keys. My dad asked where I was going. I said anywhere but here tonight. He nodded. I hugged my mom. She held on tight like she was afraid I might disappear. Maybe part of me already had. I walked to my truck while the last guests left. The sky was dark now. The maples rustled like they were gossiping. I sat behind the wheel and did not start the engine right away. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. "Please talk to me." I turned the phone face down, not as punishment, just as self-respect. I drove to a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with thin walls and a flickering sign, because I needed space more than comfort. I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the last few years, small things that suddenly had new subtitles, late nights, sudden changes in plans, Kyle always being around when I was not. The fix-it guy in me wanted to tear it all apart and rebuild it with logic. But this was not a structure problem. This was a people problem, and people choose. That night I did not sleep much, but I did think, and by morning I had something I had not had the day before, clarity. Not about what they did, that was obvious, but about what I was going to do next, because the story was not over just because the party ended, and I was not going to let betrayal write the ending for me. Not this time. Not ever. And when my phone buzzed again just before sunrise, this time from Kyle, saying we need to talk, man, I laughed out loud in that empty room. Because of all the things I needed, another conversation with him was not one of them. And that was when I decided the next move would be quiet, deliberate, and completely mine. And that is where the real twist started. I checked out of the motel before the sun fully committed to the day. The clerk did not ask questions, and I appreciated that. Some moments do not need witnesses. I drove to work because routine can be a lifeline. The job site smelled like dust and metal and fresh lumber. Familiar, honest. Nobody pretending to be something they were not. My foreman asked if everything was good at home. I said, "Yeah, just tired," which was true enough to pass inspection. I worked hard that day. Harder than usual, because physical effort has a way of burning off mental noise. By lunch, my phone had filled up with messages. Marissa apologizing, then explaining, then apologizing again. Kyle switching between sorry and defensive like a bad radio station. My mom asking if I was okay. My dad saying, "Call me when you can." I did not respond yet, not because I was avoiding them, but because I was choosing myself for once. After work, I went to the bank, then to a storage unit, then back to the house Marissa and I shared. She was there, sitting at the table like she had been waiting all day. The house felt different, not hostile, just exposed, like the walls had been listening. She stood up when she saw me, started talking fast. I held up my hand. I said, "I am not here to argue. I am here to gather my things." She froze, then said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "It means exactly what it sounds like." She cried again, said it was a mistake, said it meant nothing, said she loved me. I listened, really listened, because closure comes from hearing the full story sometimes. But when she finished, I said something surprised her. I said, "I believe you believe that. But belief does not rebuild trust. Choices do. And you already made yours." I packed a bag, important documents, work clothes, things I actually used. She followed me from room to room like she could change the outcome by proximity. When I reached the door, she said, "What about Kyle?" And I said, "What about him?" She said, "He ruined everything." And that was when I realized something important. She was still outsourcing responsibility, and I was done carrying other people's weight. I left and went to my parents' place. My dad was in the garage. He looked relieved when he saw me. We sat on overturned buckets like we used to when I was a kid. He said, "I am proud of how you handled it." And that mattered more than he probably knew. My mom made coffee and did not ask questions, just let the silence work. Later that night, Kyle showed up, uninvited. My dad did not let him inside. They talked on the porch, voices low, tense. I did not join them, because some battles are not yours to fight. Kyle left angry, tires spinning a little too fast. My dad came back in and said I told him he is not welcome here until he figures out who he wants to be. That was another crack in the old family picture. But cracks let light in. Over the next few days, things moved fast. I spoke to a lawyer, not out of revenge, but clarity. I moved my direct deposit. I rented a small place near work, nothing fancy, just quiet. Marissa kept reaching out, then stopped, then tried again. I stayed consistent, calm, firm. Cal sent one last message blaming stress, alcohol, timing. I deleted it. My job offered me a lead position on a new project out of town. More responsibility, better pay. I took it without hesitation. Sometimes life gives you a door right when you stop begging at the wrong one. The night before I left town, I stood in my new empty apartment and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not happiness yet, but relief is the foundation. Happiness is built on. And as I turned off the light, I realized the betrayal did not end me. It redirected me. And the story was still unfolding, just on terms I finally controlled. The new project was 3 hours away, far enough to feel like a reset without pretending I was starting a whole new life. The site was big, loud, organized chaos. The kind of place where problems show up early and honesty matters. I liked that. Nobody cared about my past there. They cared if I showed up on time and knew what I was doing, which I did. Being a lead meant more paperwork, more decisions, more responsibility, but it also meant I was trusted, and trust feels different when you have recently watched it collapse somewhere else. My days filled up fast, mornings with planning, afternoons with problem solving, evenings with quiet dinners and early nights. The silence in my apartment stopped feeling empty and started feeling peaceful, like the kind of quiet you earn. I talked to my parents regularly. My mom worried in her quiet way. My dad checked in like a supervisor who pretends he is not supervising. Cal was not mentioned much, which told me more than words could. Marissa called once late at night. I did not answer. She left a message that sounded calmer than before, more reflective, less desperate. I listened to it once, then archived it, not deleted, because I was not trying to erase the past. Just put it in its proper place. A few weeks and I got invited out by some of the crew. Nothing wild, burgers and a game on TV. I went, laughed more than I expected, told a watered-down version of why I had relocated. Nobody pushed. Respect again. It kept showing up in small ways. One night after work, I ran into Kyle at a gas station near my place. I had not expected that. He looked thinner, restless, like someone whose excuses had expired. We stood there awkwardly by the pumps. He said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." Long pause. He started talking about how things had blown up, how our parents barely spoke to him, how Marissa was staying with a friend, how he felt like the villain in everyone's story. I listened, because listening does not mean agreeing. When he finished, he waited, like he expected absolution. I said, "I am not angry anymore, but I am also not interested in rebuilding something that broke because you did not respect it." He asked if we would ever be okay again, and I said that depends on what okay means to you. If it means pretending nothing happened, then no. If it means accepting consequences and growing up, then maybe, someday. He nodded, not happy, but quieter, and that was enough. I drove home feeling lighter than I expected, not because he apologized, but because I did not need it. Weeks turned into months. The project progressed. The building rose, floor by floor, solid, intentional. I saw myself in it. Something torn down being rebuilt stronger. Marissa sent paperwork through the lawyer. Clean, efficient, no drama. That told me she was finally facing reality too. I signed, returned it, moved on. One evening my dad visited. We grilled on my tiny balcony, laughed about nothing important, and he said something that stuck. He said, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is just the thing that makes you stop settling. I watched the sun go down over a city that was not mine yet, but could be, and I realized I was not defined by what they did. I was defined by how I responded, steady, clear, forward. The fix-it guy had learned something new. Not everything needs fixing. Some things need leaving. And as I stood there with grease on my hands and peace in my chest, I knew the suspense was over for me, even if the story kept going, because I had already won in the only way that mattered, by choosing myself without bitterness, without regret, and without looking back. Time has a strange way of proving points you no longer argue for. A few months after everything settled, I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came, not because I was strong, but because I was busy living again. Work stayed solid. The project hit milestones early. My boss noticed, not with speeches, just with trust. More decisions, fewer check-ins. That kind of respect feels earned in a way applause never does. My routine sharpened. Gym before work, coffee on the drive, music that matched my mood instead of fighting it. I slept better too. The kind of sleep where you wake up without replaying conversations that already ended. One afternoon my mom called and asked if I would come home for dinner. Just me and them. No events, no explanations. I said yes. When I pulled into the driveway, it felt smaller than I remembered. Not sad, just accurate. People grow, spaces stay. We ate, talked about ordinary things. My dad asked about work. My mom asked if I was eating well. Then she said Kyle moved out of state. New job, fresh start. I nodded, hoped he meant it this time. Marissa never came up, not because she was forbidden, but because she no longer needed airtime. Driving back that night, I realized something quietly powerful. The betrayal that once filled every thought had been reduced to a chapter, not the title. I was not angry, not proud, just finished. Later that week, I signed a lease extension, bought a decent couch, hung a few photos. Nothing symbolic, just practical. My life no longer felt like recovery. It felt like progress. And that was the real victory. Not revenge, not closure speeches, just the steady return of self-respect. The kind nobody can take from you once you stop handing it out for free. And as I turned off the light that night, I smiled. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I did. The funny thing about rebuilding yourself is that one day you forget you were ever broken. It happens quietly, not with announcements, just small moments stacking up, like realizing you hum while making coffee again, or that silence no longer feels like a question. Work sent me to another site, different crew, same standards, and I fit right in, because when you stop carrying emotional weight that is not yours, you walk lighter without trying. One evening after a long shift, I sat on my balcony watching traffic move like it actually knew where it was going. And I thought about how close I came to exploding that night at my parents' house. How easy it would have been to yell, accuse, turn pain into a performance. But I did not. And that choice kept paying interest. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was Marissa, short, respectful. She said she hoped I was doing well and wanted to let me know she was starting therapy and taking accountability. No excuses, no asks. I read it twice, then replied with one sentence. I am glad you are taking care of yourself. I wish you well. And that was it. No knots in my stomach. No urge to say more. Just closure without ceremony. Later that week, my dad called and told me Kyle had reached out to him. Sounded different, calmer, finally owning his mistakes. I told my dad I hoped that was true and meant it. Forgiveness does not mean access, but it does mean peace. And peace had become my default setting. I started making plans again. Not escape plans, real ones, saving for a better place, maybe my own house someday. The kind with a solid foundation, because I appreciate good foundations now more than ever. The suspense that once ruled my life had faded, replaced by something steadier, confidence without arrogance, humor without bitterness, clarity without cruelty. I was not the guy who got betrayed anymore. I was the guy who learned, adapted, and kept moving. And if someone asked me what the turning point was, I would not say the party, or the door, or the betrayal. I would say it was the moment I chose dignity over drama, because that choice changed everything that came after. And I went to sleep that night knowing the final part of the story was already written in my actions, not my pain. The last thing I learned from all of this was simple, and it took me a long time to see it clearly. Life does not test you to see how much pain you can survive. It tests you to see how much self-respect you can keep when things fall apart. A year passed without announcements, no dramatic milestones, just steady progress. I moved into a better place closer to work, signed papers with a calm hand, built savings, built routines, built peace. My parents visited. Laughter came easier now, lighter. My mom smiled more. My dad talked less and meant more. Kyle sent a message once, not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging the damage. I replied kindly and briefly, because kindness does not require closeness, and boundaries do not require anger. Sometimes the strongest response is a measured one. I never ran into Marissa again, but I heard through quiet channels that she was rebuilding too, and I wished her well without reopening anything, because some chapters are meant to stay closed. One evening I stood on a job site after everyone left, the structure nearly complete, solid against the sky, and I felt proud, not just of the building, but of myself. I had not collapsed. I had not hardened. I had not become small. I had stayed honest, steady, and forward-moving. The guy who fixes things had learned the most important fix of all, knowing when to walk away with your dignity intact. If you are listening to this and wondering how the story ends, it ends quietly, with a man who knows his worth, who does not need revenge to feel whole, who understands that betrayal can break trust, but it does not get to break you. And I drove home that night with the windows down, music low, future open, not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally aligned with myself. And that is the kind of ending nobody can take away.